3 days ago, I buried my daughter. Today, I unlocked the front door of our home and stepped back into the world without her. I didn't expect the house to feel this wrong. Outside, the wind brushed through the dried banana leaves in the backyard. The faint orange glow of the street lamp painted shaky shadows along the side of the porch. I could see our mailbox still bent from the time Aurora ran into it with her bike. I never fixed it. She thought it looked cooler that way. The engine died behind me in the garage with a final sputter. My boots echoed across the clean cement floor, leaving muddy prints fresh from the soft, wet soil at Oakwood Memorial Park. The funeral was brief. No eulogy. I couldn't get the words out. Just silence. "Forgive me," I muttered aloud. It was the third time since stepping out of the car. The words had no weight anymore. Saying them felt like chewing on ash. The house greeted me with a familiar layout that now felt foreign. Everything in its place, but nothing where it should be. The walls were the same color. The furniture hadn't moved, but something was gone. And I don't just mean Aurora. I passed the kitchen, her cereal bowl still in the sink. Banana peels browned and curling at the edges rested on the granite countertop, right where she left them 3 days ago, like she was planning to come back and clean up. "Cassia," I whispered her nickname. No answer. Of course not. Cassandra, my ex-wife and Aurora's mother, left the same night we laid our daughter to rest. We divorced 3 years ago, but she still visited every weekend. A psychiatrist, sharp-minded, emotionally withdrawn. Aurora adored her. She flew back to Dallas hours after the funeral, left me here with a house that no longer had a pulse. I climbed the stairs, slowly. Each wooden step groaned beneath me, like it hadn't carried weight in years. I glanced at the walls lined with black frame family photos, almost all of Aurora, from her first gummy smile to her 7th birthday party just last month. That was the last time she'd laughed out loud, the last time I saw her alive. Her door stood shut at the end of the hallway, white, simple brass knob. I hadn't touched it since the police carried her body out. I stopped. My hand hovered over the doorknob. My fingers trembled, and I hated myself for it. This was my daughter's room, not a war zone. With a shaky breath, I twisted the knob and pushed. The door opened with a soft creak. The scent hit me first. Faint lavender mixed with crayons and dust. Aurora's scent. It broke something in me. I had to swallow back the sob crawling up my throat. Everything was exactly how she left it. Pink floral bedsheets, half-read comics on her shelf. Her wooden desk still had rainbow-colored pencils scattered like tiny soldiers, but something was wrong. The closet, it dominated the north wall, an old oak wardrobe we painted together last year. Aurora chose white and painted little vines and purple flowers across the doors. One of the vines trailed off mid-stroke, like she got distracted. She probably did. That's who she was. I stepped closer. The late afternoon light bled through the curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. My heartbeat quickened the nearer I got. There was nothing threatening about it. Just a closet, painted by a child, full of her dresses and toys. But my gut told me something was waiting behind that door. I stood there, my reflection dimly staring back from the glossy wood finish. "Aurora," I whispered. Are you in there?" "Of course not." My voice cracked. My fingers reached toward the brass handle. It was cold, far colder than the rest of the room. Then the handle moved, just a twitch, like something shifted inside. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed. A sound, almost too quiet to be real, followed. A soft thump, then a scrape, like tiny nails across the inside of the door. My mind screamed at me to stop, that I was hallucinating, but my heart recognized the rhythm. When Aurora used to hide from storms, she'd crawl into the closet and knock twice when she wanted me to come find her. 2 knocks, then silence. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. The closet was empty. No shoes, no clothes, just bare wooden planks and the scent of dried lavender sachets. But on the floor, something else. A shoe, small, yellow, soaked in something dark. My breath caught. I staggered backward. My knees hit the edge of her bed. Then I heard it, soft, barely a whisper, coming from inside the closet. "Daddy." I snapped my head around. No one there, just the shoe. "Don't leave me alone." The voice was unmistakable. Aurora's. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't, not after hearing her voice so small, so familiar coming from inside an empty closet. I sat in her room for hours, knees pulled to my chest like some broken doll, just watching that white painted door, waiting for something else. Nothing came, but the shoe was still there, still damp with something that looked too dark to be dirt. I didn't dare touch it. I couldn't even tell if it was the one she wore the day she died. When the first gray strands of morning filtered through the blinds, I finally moved. My knees popped, my back ached, the kind of ache that reminded you you're still alive, even when part of you doesn't want to be. I picked up the shoe. The sole was torn slightly at the heel. It was hers. Aurora always dragged her feet, even when I told her to pick them up, like a little zombie. I used to joke, but there was no rational reason that shoe should be here. She was buried in her favorite yellow dress and her sneakers, both of them. I remember seeing them in the casket. I stood right there, unless I didn't let myself finish that thought. Instead, I wrapped the shoe in an old towel and shoved it into the bottom drawer of my dresser like it was radioactive. I didn't want to look at it again. Around 2 a.m. the next night, it started again. I had been lying on the couch in the living room, lights off, wrapped in an old fleece blanket that smelled like stale beer and pine cleaner. I couldn't sleep in my bed, not yet. Then I heard it. Step, step, creaking above my head slow, dragging steps across the upstairs floor. My heart leapt into my throat. I muted the TV with shaking hands and sat perfectly still. Step, step, pause, right above the living room, the hallway outside Aurora's door. I whispered out loud, "No, no, not again." Step, step, closer to the top of the stairs. There was no one else in this house. I hadn't given anyone a key. Cassandra was 200 miles away. The cops had told me it was a clean death. No foul play, no intruders. But someone was walking upstairs. I stood up slowly, grabbing the baseball bat I kept under the couch, an old habit from when Aurora first started having night terrors. Back then, I used to joke I'd beat the boogeyman senseless if he ever showed up. Now, I wasn't so sure. I crept up the stairs, each one groaning louder than I remembered. The hallway stretched long and narrow, shadows clinging to the ceiling like mold. And that's when I saw it. The closet door. It was open, just a crack, but enough to see the darkness inside. And the darkness wasn't still. It shimmered, wavered, like water, or heat distortion, or something breathing. I stepped forward. My voice barely came out. Aurora. The air grew colder the closer I got. My breath turned to fog, and then something inside moved. I stopped. My knuckles turned white on the bat. From the gap between the doors, I saw it something glowing. Faint lights drifting in the dark, like fish with bioluminescent fins swimming through black ocean. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. The lights were still there. Something brushed the inside of the door. A soft thud, then a whisper, "Daddy." They won't let me leave. I stumbled back, almost tripping over a pile of Aurora's stuffed animals. I ran down the stairs, didn't stop until I slammed the basement door shut and locked it behind me. I didn't even know why I chose the basement. It was dark, cold, and filled with mildew, but it was away. I stayed there until the sun came up. When I finally emerged, my mouth dry and my body trembling, I tried to convince myself I was grieving, hallucinating, sleep deprived, but I couldn't shake what I saw. Those glowing lights in the closet, the voice. Aurora's voice saying they won't let me leave. They... Who the hell was they? I didn't go upstairs again. Not that day. Not the next. I kept the bedroom door closed and piled chairs in front of it like a coward. I told myself it was just in case, but the truth was, I didn't trust the house anymore. It didn't feel like mine. It didn't feel like hers. It felt like something was bleeding through the walls. Slow and deliberate, like rot under paint. I needed help, not from Cassandra. I couldn't call her. She'd think I was losing it, that I was spiraling, and maybe I was. I hadn't eaten more than a sandwich in 2 days. I'd forgotten how to cry without clenching my teeth. Instead, I drove 3 houses down, to the edge of our cul-de-sac, and knocked on the door of Rowena Frost. Everyone knew her. Most just called her that old witch woman. but never to her face. She lived alone in a creaky Victorian with ivy strangling the porch and wind chimes made from bones or something that looked like bones. I remember Aurora once saying, "Rowena's house looks like it remembers things." Back then, it made me laugh. Now, it chilled me. The door opened before I knocked again. She stood there in a thick black shawl despite the Texas heat. Her silver hair hung down past her shoulders, loose and tangled like roots. Her face was lined but calm, and her eyes, ice blue, pierced right through me. "Daniel Hartwell," she said, like she'd been expecting me. "Come in." I hesitated. She turned and walked back inside without waiting. Her house was cluttered, but not messy. It was like stepping into a museum that hadn't been curated in decades. Dried herbs hung from ceiling beams. Crystals lined the windowsills. A taxidermy owl stared from the mantel, and beside it sat a bowl of what looked like black river stones. I kept thinking, this place smells like thunder and tea. Rowena poured me a cup of something dark and steaming and handed it over without a word. I held it, too nervous to drink. I saw her. I said finally, I think I heard her voice. From the closet. Rowena didn't flinch. She sat across from me in a sun-faded armchair and nodded slowly. "The white painted one in the north corner of her room," she said. My skin prickled. How did you know that? "I dreamed of her yesterday," Rowena replied. She was crying. I blinked at her, unable to speak. "You didn't perform any rituals," she continued. "No songs, no smoke, no farewell oil. You put her in the ground and walked away." I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I whispered. "I did what the funeral director told me. A casket. A burial. Isn't that?" "No." She cut me off gently. "Not for children like her. Not when the veil is thin." I didn't know what to say. The room felt smaller. "Daniel," she said, her tone firmer. "You and Aurora, you're connected in ways deeper than blood. And when she died, something got left open." I stared at my cup. My hands were shaking. Her voice. "I said," she said, "they won't let her leave." Rowena's gaze darkened. "She's trapped," she murmured, "still close to this world, but not alone." My stomach turned. "Trapped where?" "In the between," she said. "That's what we call it. The space between living and dead. A liminal crack, and cracks draw attention." She reached behind her chair and pulled out a thick, weathered book bound in cracked leather. She flipped through the pages with practiced fingers until she found what she wanted, a page filled with handwritten symbols, both in Cherokee and English. I leaned closer. The title read, "Ritual of the Hollow Door." Is this a cleansing, a farewell? A door shut properly. Will it bring her peace? Rowena looked at me then, truly looked. Her eyes shimmered, not with magic, but with sorrow. If done right, yes. But you need to understand, Daniel Aurora's not malevolent. Not yet. But the longer she stays Buchumbi'i, the more likely she is to change. My chest tightened. "You mean she could become something else?" She nodded. Spirits left in limbo become confused. Angry, especially children. They don't understand why they're gone. If something else finds them first, it can twist that sadness. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. What do I need to do? Rowena gently tore the page from the book and handed it to me. "You'll need certain items. I'll write a list. And you'll need someone with you when you do it. You must never confront the closet alone." She stood and disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps creaking across ancient floorboards. I stared at the paper in my hands. My daughter was calling from the other side of a hollow door. And now, I had to decide whether I was brave enough to open it. I drove home with the page folded neatly in my shirt pocket, though it felt more like I was carrying a live match near dry leaves. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I wasn't scared of the ritual, not yet. I was scared of what I had already seen, and what I might see again. The house greeted me with its usual silence. No movement, no lights, just the low, ambient hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick-tick-tick of the wall clock. I stood in the kitchen for a while, not really thinking, just staring at the floor where Aurora once spilled an entire bottle of orange juice and laughed so hard she cried. I missed that laugh. By nightfall, the tension returned like a fever behind the eyes. I kept glancing at the staircase, at her door. The chairs I'd stacked in front of it were still there. though I could swear one had shifted slightly to the left. I tried to distract myself, cooked half a frozen pizza, drank warm soda, flipped through channels, but my body was stuck in high alert. Every creak in the ceiling made my shoulders twitch. Every gust of wind outside made my fingers clench. And then came the voice, faint but unmistakable. Daddy. I froze, halfway between the living room and the hallway. The voice drifted down the stairs, carried on a breeze that didn't exist. I'm cold. I didn't remember climbing the stairs. One moment I was standing still. The next, I was pushing aside the chairs and standing before her door. It was slightly ajar. No, I had closed it. I was sure of it. The hallway behind me dimmed, the overhead bulb flickering like a weak pulse. I stepped inside. Her room was unchanged. The little pink lamp on her nightstand glowed faintly, even though I hadn't plugged it in since the funeral. The air smelled like crayon wax and baby shampoo. The smell hit me like a punch to the gut. And the closet door, it was wide open, not cracked, not shifting, just open. Inside, darkness, but not just the absence of light. This darkness was thicker, textured, like smoke on the water, and in the very center, right at the bottom, was something new, a trail of water. It glistened in the glow of the nightstand light, stretching out across the pink carpet like a snail's trail. I stepped closer. My foot hit something small and hard. I looked down. Aurora's toy camera, plastic, purple, cracked near the lens. I picked it up and pressed the shutter. A faint click. She used to pretend to photograph monsters. I'll keep you safe. Daddy, she'd say, I'll shoot 'em if they come close. God, I wanted her voice back. Daddy, I'm hurting. The sound came from the closet again. My vision blurred. I wasn't crying. Not exactly. It was like my body couldn't decide what to do. The whisper came again, more urgent. They won't let me leave. I stepped toward the closet. The darkness rippled, just slightly, like something had stirred the air from inside. I reached out a trembling hand toward the interior. My fingers broke the boundary of the shadow, and the cold hit me like diving into ice water. Something touched my palm, a tiny hand. I recoiled violently, stumbling backward, hitting her bookshelf. Books and dolls tumbled to the floor around me. The darkness in the closet shimmered. I swear I saw a face just then, not Aurora's. Something pale and slick-skinned, like it had never seen the sun. Its eyes were round and hollow, its mouth too wide for its skull. And then it was gone. The door slammed shut, the lamp shattered, and everything went still. I bolted down the stairs, into the garage. I sat in the front seat of my car and screamed into the steering wheel until I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do this alone. I pulled out my phone. The first number I dialed wasn't Cassandra. It wasn't the police. It was Rowena. She picked up after one ring. They're touching her now, I said. I felt it. Something's in the closet with her. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. I need you to meet someone, Rowena said softly. Someone who's seen this kind of thing before. Who? Dr. Thorncroft. He used to study ritual trauma. He's Cherokee, like my grandmother, and he believes in what you saw. I was silent. Daniel, she continued. You don't just have a ghost in your house. You have a door that never closed. And something else has noticed. Rowena gave me an address scrawled in shaky handwriting on a piece of parchment paper that smelled faintly of sage. She didn't offer to come with me, and I didn't ask. I got the sense that whatever this was, it had already reached too far into her life. The drive to Dr. Thorncroft's home took just under 40 minutes, winding through narrow roads outside of town, where the trees grew too close to the street, and the air felt heavy with things unsaid. His house was an old brick structure tucked behind a wall of hedges and oak. It reminded me of an overgrown library, quiet, slow, and filled with secrets. He opened the door before I knocked. Mr. Hartwell, he said. Come in. His voice was low, calm, and southern. The kind that makes you feel like someone's about to tell you something important without ever raising their voice. He looked to be in his late 50s. With dark bronze skin and a face lined by years of reading too much and sleeping too little. His eyes were sharp, but tired, the eyes of someone who had stared at too many things others refused to see. His study looked like something out of a museum. Walls lined with maps, old books, animal bones, and native artifacts. A large map of Texas sat pinned to a corkboard, and several red strings connected various dots. My hometown, Oakwood, was circled 3 times. Dr. Thorncroft gestured for me to sit. He didn't ask why I came. He didn't need to. Instead, he handed me a folder. Inside were black and white photos of gravestones. Children's graves, all buried in Oakwood Memorial Park, all within the last 20 years, all dead before their 8th birthday. My throat tightened. This, he said, is the pattern. I nodded slowly, flipping through the images. Tiny headstones carved with angels, teddy bears, little lambs. Are you saying this has happened before? Thorncroft rubbed his hands together, thoughtful. I'm saying there's something wrong with the land. He stood, walked over to a shelf, and pulled out a thin, brittle journal. It started over a century ago, before Oakwood became a cemetery. That land used to be ceremonial ground. Cherokee, my own family has roots there, but settlers took it, built over it, desecrated it. Some say the spirits never left. Others believe they were trapped. He opened the journal to a faded drawing, a narrow, dark doorway carved into the earth. Around it, stick-figured children with hollow eyes. It's called the Hollow Threshold, he said, a concept in Cherokee folklore. When someone dies violently or unexpectedly, especially children, they can become caught in the in-between unless certain rites are performed. If they're buried on disturbed ground, the veil grows thinner. Their grief can act like a beacon. I stared at him. A beacon for what? He looked at me, truly looked, for whatever else is listening. The words chilled me. I leaned forward. My daughter, Aurora, she's been speaking to me. Through her closet, sometimes I see things, faces, and it's getting worse. Thorncroft nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. Closets are often symbolic gateways. Small, confined spaces are more vulnerable. Children hide in them, dream in them. If the veil is already torn, a closet becomes more than just wood and nails. It becomes a portal. I rubbed my face. My skin felt too tight. So what do I do? He handed me a second folder. Inside was a list of material. Cedar ash, red clay, copper bells, a lock of the child's hair if available, and something called Gitu oil, a mixture sacred to his people, used to close spiritual fractures. We'll need to perform a sealing, he said. But first, we need to know what came through, because if it's not just your daughter, if something else is attached to her. He didn't finish that sentence. He didn't have to. I looked down at the list, then up at him. And if I don't do this, Thorncroft stood slowly, walked to the window. His silhouette in the afternoon light looked like it belonged to a statue older than any one culture. If you don't, he said, Aurora's voice will fade, but not because she moved on. It'll be because something else swallowed it. I didn't go home right away. I parked near the lake instead, sat in the silence of the cab, watching the wind play on the surface of the water. It was the same spot Aurora loved to feed ducks. Back when life was simple, she'd always carry too much bread in her pockets and laugh when the ducks chased her. Now, the memory felt like a punch to the lungs. She wasn't gone, not entirely. But she wasn't really here, either, and according to Thorncroft, if I waited too long, the version of her that remained would dissolve into something other. The folder he gave me sat on the passenger seat, glowing faintly in the sunset. I hadn't even looked at the second page yet. My fingers itched to, but my mind wasn't ready. When I finally got home, it was almost dark. The house looked quieter, like it had decided to hold its breath. I stepped through the front door, keys still in hand, and immediately noticed something new. The picture on the hallway wall, the one of Aurora on her 5th birthday. Frosting on her cheeks was tilted, only slightly. I hadn't touched it. I stared at it for several seconds before reaching out and straightening the frame. As soon as I did, the upstairs floor creaked. Footsteps, then silence. I set down the folder, slowly, and walked to the stairs. No bat this time, no false courage, just me and the growing chill that started in my fingertips. I climbed, one step, another. Halfway up, I stopped. The door to Aurora's room was open. I hadn't opened it, and on the floor just inside the threshold was something that hadn't been there before. Her diary, small, teal-colored, with the glitter stickers peeling off the cover. I didn't even remember seeing it in the room since she passed. I thought Cassandra took it. I bent down, picked it up, and opened it to the final entry, March 11th. I heard it again last night, the knocking. 3 times. I thought it was Daddy at first, but it wasn't his footsteps. It's slower, heavy, like something wearing wet clothes. It said my name. It used a voice that sounded like me but wasn't. I don't want to open the closet. I think it wants me to forget who I am. If anything happens to me, I hope Daddy remembers what Grandma N said about rituals. If you leave the door open, the dark gets curious. My fingers trembled. The ink was smudged near the bottom, like it had been written in a hurry, or with tears. I flipped back a few more pages, doodles of her and me at the park. Her with Cassandra. Silly little things like, I want a cat named Pancake. Then, March 5th. I saw a man in the closet last night, but he didn't have a face, just a blur. I pretended to sleep, but he kept whispering, "You're not alone here." I dropped the journal. My breathing turned shallow. I backed out of the room, down the hallway. I didn't even notice the hallway light had gone out until I reached the stairs and realized the whole second floor was covered in that cold, breathing shadow again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A blocked number. I answered. "Mr. Hartwell," a man's voice said, measured. "Calm. This is Inspector Gideon Wolf. Dr. Thorncroft called me. I understand there's something going on in your home related to Oakwood Memorial." I swallowed hard. "Yes, something. Something's in her closet. I need to meet with you," he said. "Not tomorrow. Now. I've seen this before, and we may not have much time." I gave him my address. He arrived 15 minutes later in a nondescript black SUV. He looked nothing like I expected. Tall, angular, with slicked back black and silver hair, and eyes like polished obsidian. He wore no badge, just a long coat and gloves despite the spring heat. He stepped inside like he already knew the layout, like he'd been here before. He glanced at the stairs. Upstairs. I nodded. He took the steps 2 at a time. "Wait," I called. "What exactly have you seen before?" He paused on the landing, half turned. "I've investigated 3 other cases in the last 2 years where a child was buried in Oakwood, and something started whispering to the living. In each case, it began in the closet. In each case, it escalated. Escalated how?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his coat pocket and pulled out 3 old photographs, black and white, blurry. Each one showed a different closet. Each one was burned around the edges, and in every photo, barely visible if you squinted, was the faint outline of a figure standing just inside the open door. Too tall to be a child, too thin to be human, and no face. Just void. Inspector Wolf moved like someone who had done this before. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask to sit or for a glass of water. He went straight for Aurora's room, scanning the space like it might breathe or strike. I followed him in, each step heavier than the last. The air was thick again, same as before. Not humid, not hot, just dense, like the molecules had rearranged themselves into something unnatural. Aurora's bed still sat untouched. Her books still spilled across the floor, but the closet door was shut now. Wolf didn't move toward it, not yet. Instead, he turned to me and said, "What happened the first night?" I told him everything, my return from the funeral. The sounds, the voice, the shoe, the coldness, the vision, the hand in the dark, all of it. I expected him to react, roll his eyes, look skeptical, but he didn't. He just listened, head slightly tilted, eyes focused, as if cataloging every word into some ancient pattern only he knew how to read. When I mentioned the face, pale, slick-skinned, too wide a mouth, he nodded. "You're not seeing Aurora, not entirely. What does that mean? There's an entity using her grief to manifest. Think of it like mold. It grows wherever things rot, especially grief, guilt, fear, and closets are perfect incubators." I shivered. "So it's not her I've been hearing?" "Oh no," he said. "You've definitely been hearing her, but it's not only her." Then he knelt before the closet, pulled a small metal box from his coat pocket, blackened with age, covered in carvings. He flipped it open. Inside were 3 small copper bells, red clay powder, a white stone, and a silver coin with a hole drilled through the center. He handed me one of the copper bells. "Shake it once," he said. "If nothing happens, we're alone." I hesitated, then shook it. The soft tink barely rang through the silence. For a moment, nothing. Then something moved inside the closet. A thud, followed by a low, raspy whisper. "Don't." I stumbled back. My spine collided with the bedpost. Wolf stood calmly. Though his shoulders were tense, he picked up the silver coin, whispered something in a language I didn't recognize, Cherokee, maybe, and rolled it across the floor toward the closet door. It didn't bounce. It stopped right at the threshold and began to spin. I didn't touch it. Neither did Wolf. It spun faster and faster until it lifted slightly off the ground. The light in the room dimmed. No flicker. Just dimmed. Like something was draining the power. And then the closet door clicked open. Slowly, inch by inch, Wolf stepped forward, muttering another word, and threw a pinch of the red clay powder into the darkness. The cloud hovered in mid-air for a second, then shot backward, sucked into the void like breath through a straw. The closet groaned, and from inside, Aurora's voice. "Dad, it's hurting me. Make it stop," I cried out. "Aurora." Wolf held me back. "That's not her speaking." "That's it wearing her voice." "No, you don't understand. He turned to me sharply. "Do you want to help her? Or feed the thing using her like a ventriloquist's dummy?" That shut me up. He approached the closet, held out the stone. "If she's in there, this will react. It absorbs residual heat signatures from spirits. It can detect human emotion." The stone didn't glow. It shuddered. Wolf blinked. "That's new. What does that mean?" "It means she's not alone in there. And whatever's with her, it's not bound to the house." I felt my knees weaken. I sat on her bed, burying my face in my hands. He knelt in front of me. "You still have her hair?" he asked. I nodded. "A lock of it from her first haircut, in an envelope." "Good. We'll need it." "Also something she loved, her toy, a favorite object." "You have that." I pulled out the cracked toy camera from my coat pocket. Wolf smiled faintly. "Perfect. Now we find Father Hawk, the priest Rowena mentioned." He nodded. "He's not just a priest. He's a ritualist. Cherokee and Mayan roots. If there's anyone who can perform a sealing rite correctly, it's him. But he won't come here unless you ask personally." "Why?" "Because he believes you opened the door, and only you can close it." I found Father Ambrose Hawk in the most unexpected place, a quiet chapel outside Bastrop, nestled at the edge of an old pine forest. The air there smelled like incense and moss, and the building looked like it had been built from the bones of the earth itself. No steeple, no stained glass, just smooth, weathered stone and a hand-carved door. I hesitated at the threshold. I felt unworthy. Then the door opened. He stood there, a silhouette against flickering candlelight. A man in his 50s, maybe older, with bronze skin and hair braided back in a loose, silver-threaded tail. His robe was simple dark cloth and a woven red sash. Around his neck hung a medallion carved with symbols I didn't recognize. "Daniel Hartwell," he said, as if I'd been expected. His voice was low and calm, like rain tapping an old window pane. "How did you know?" "Rowena told me," he said, stepping aside. "But I already dreamed of your daughter." That made me freeze. "She was scared," he continued, "but she's strong, and she remembers who she is. That matters. Inside." The chapel was no church. It was a space built for something older than Christianity. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with bundles of dried herbs, candles, ceremonial tools, and hand-bound books. In the center stood a stone altar, carved with sigils that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. We sat facing each other, the flicker of flame between us. "She's trapped," I told him, "in the closet. And I don't think she's alone." "She's not," he confirmed. "And that's why I must ask, do you believe she's dead?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. "I buried her," I said. "That's not what I asked." I swallowed. She feels alive. Her voice, her presence." Father Hawk leaned forward. "That's because she is, not in the physical sense, but in the echo that grief leaves behind. Sometimes when a soul dies suddenly, especially when unprepared, the mind clings to the living. A child doesn't understand separation. Their fear becomes tether. And the thing inside the closet? I asked. He looked grim. It's what we call a memory eater. A spirit that survives by attaching to unsealed grief. It mirrors, it mimics, and eventually it replaces. I felt the floor fall out from under me. If we don't act, he said, Aurora's soul will be digested. She won't vanish, she'll become part of it, trapped inside something hollow. What do I have to do? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Father Hawk stood and walked to a side shelf. He retrieved a small wooden box wrapped in red twine and placed it gently in front of me. Inside was a bundle, 3 incense sticks made of cedar and myrrh, a triangle of red sand, a painted gourd with black symbols, and a feather wrapped in cloth. These are tools, he said. The ritual is called the reclamation. It must be performed at the threshold, the exact boundary where the spirit lingers. For you, that's the closet. He paused. But you must go in. My stomach dropped. You have to sever the bond. You must enter the space where the tether is strongest. The entity will resist. It will lie. It will show you things. But if you carry her essence, something she loved, something she wore, and a piece of her life, you may reach her before it's too late. I shook my head. If I go in, can I come back? He looked me in the eyes. That depends on whether you believe she's worth dying for. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Later that night, I gathered everything. Her toy camera, the envelope with a lock of her hair, the yellow sneaker, and the ritual box. The house was dark when I returned, the sky above full of moonless clouds, like the night was holding its breath. Rowena was already inside, standing near the stairs. She nodded at me without a word. Inspector Wolf leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, a small notebook in his hand. You sure about this? He asked. No, I said, but I'm not leaving her in there. They didn't argue. Father Hawk arrived a few minutes later. He entered like a shadow cast by something older than the walls. He carried a second bag long, leather, and bound with charms that clicked softly as he moved. We gathered in Aurora's room. The closet door was wide open, but there was no visible darkness, just a hollow silence that ached behind the eyes. Form the triangle, Hawk instructed. Rowena placed the red sand in 3 small piles, one in front of the closet, the others forming a triangle around where I'd sit. Wolf lit the incense. Hawk opened the gourd, sprinkling bitter-smelling powder across the carpet. Then he turned to me. Speak her name, he said, and asked permission. I knelt, heart pounding. Aurora Mary Hartwell, I said. This is your father. I'm here to bring you home. I give you permission to return. If you can hear me. The closet creaked. From the shadows, her voice, Daddy. They're watching. The wind outside howled. Then everything went silent. Don't step forward yet, Father Hawk said in a hush. You'll only get one chance. If you go in unbalanced, it will twist your memory before you even see her. I stayed kneeling, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. My palms were slick with sweat. The red sand triangle around me felt like it might collapse at any moment, and the incense burned thick and heavy, curling into shapes that didn't make sense. Shapes that seemed to shift if I looked at them too long. Rowena muttered a low chant beside me, words in Cherokee, her voice barely above a whisper, but it buzzed in the room like electricity in the walls. Wolf handed me the toy camera. Hold on to this no matter what, he said. It grounds you. She used it to protect herself. Let it protect you. I nodded, clutching it with trembling fingers. Father Hawk removed a thin strip of cloth from his satchel dyed red and black and tied it over my eyes. The room disappeared, just sound, scent, and the heat of the burning cedar in the air. Breathe slowly, he said. When I finish the invocation, the door will not lead to wood and drywall. You'll be inside the echo, inside the echo of memory, the place where she's trapped. It's not linear, not safe, but it is hers. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Then Hawk's voice deepened into the chant. He spoke in 3 tongues, Cherokee, Spanish, and something else I didn't recognize. The words vibrated inside my ribs like bass drums, and suddenly, the air shifted, not cooled, dropped, like the warmth was being pulled through a straw. My ears rang. The floor tilted. I felt weightless. And then the cloth was pulled from my eyes. But I wasn't in Aurora's room anymore. I stood in a hallway. Not mine, not hers. Something older. Warped wood beneath my feet. Peeling wallpaper with faded cartoon flowers. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that didn't match anything visible. The air smelled like wet soil and old perfume. I held the toy camera tighter and called out, "Aurora." No answer, just the faint sound of a music box playing off key in the distance. I walked forward. The walls were lined with pictures but not photographs. Crayon drawings, dozens of them, each one messier than the last. A girl in yellow, a house, a black scribble with eyes, a door. Some of them were smeared with brownish red fingerprints. I reached the corner and stopped. A closet stood there, white painted. Same flowers as hers. I opened it. Empty, but inside was a staircase. Descending. I didn't want to go. Every nerve screamed not to, but I remembered Hawk's voice, "Only you can close the door." So I stepped inside. Down, down, deeper. The stairs bent in impossible ways like they spiraled inward, not downward. I passed flashes of memory carved into the walls. Aurora's laugh, her 7th birthday cake, the swing at the park. They flickered like dying candles, each one dimmer than the last. And then I saw her, hunched in a corner of a gray room with no walls, just fog. She wore her yellow dress, her hair in twin braids, her knees pulled to her chest, and her tiny hands clenched tight around her old stuffed dog. "Pancake, Aurora," I whispered. She looked up, and for a moment, just a breath, it was her. Her face lit up, her eyes wide. "Daddy." I stepped forward, relief flooding me, but then her smile froze. Her eyes darted past me, and I felt it. The presence behind me. The air dropped another 10 degrees. The fog swirled. Something was in the room with us, and it wasn't moving like a person. It was gliding, silent, watching. I turned, and there it stood, tall, towering, no face, no feet, just form stitched from black cloth and ash. It shifted constantly, like smoke trying to pretend it had bones. It opened its mouth a long, gaping stretch of nothing, and in Aurora's voice, it said, "You left me alone." I backed in front of her. "You're not her." "No," it said, "but I will be soon." I reached for the ritual pouch. My hands fumbled. I felt the copper bell, the ash, the photo, the words. I remembered the chant Father Hawk taught me. 3 lines, 3 names. But before I could speak, the figure lunged. It didn't touch me. It pushed through me like I was made of mist, like it was looking for space inside. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, Aurora was gone. So was the fog. So was the thing. And I was back in her room on the floor. Inside the triangle, covered in sweat, Father Hawk knelt over me, chanting still. Rowena pressed her hand to my chest, whispering something in Cherokee. Wolf stood in the hallway, pale. It's latched onto him, he said. He didn't close the door. Father Hawk leaned in. "You have 1 night left." "1 night," Father Hawk repeated. "That's all the time you have left before it finishes merging." I sat on the cold wooden floor, heart still jackhammering, breath coming in short, useless gasps. My vision swam. My body wasn't just sore, it felt wrong, like something had been unzipped inside me and left open to the air. What does that mean? I stammered, merging. Rowena knelt beside me, her hands shaking as she wiped sweat from my forehead with a damp cloth. "It means," she said quietly, "the thing you saw, it found a thread, a place in you where it can grow. It's already inside." Hawk added, "It knows your grief. It knows your guilt. It will twist them. It will use them." I gripped the toy camera in my lap like a lifeline. "But I saw her," I said. "She was still there." She called my name. Hawk nodded, which means the door isn't sealed. Yet, Inspector Wolf stepped forward from the hallway, his face paler than I'd seen it before. "We need to talk," he said. "There's something I haven't told you. Something about the cemetery." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" Wolf pulled out a folder from his coat. Inside were faded newspaper clippings, photos, all registry pages. He spread them across Aurora's bed. I've been tracking these cases, he said. Children buried at Oakwood, 12 of them in the last 2 decades. And in every case, something went wrong. He pointed to a map of the cemetery. Tiny red X's dotted the perimeter. They were all buried along the northeast quadrant, the area that used to be Cherokee ritual ground. Your daughter's grave, he tapped one of the X's, is right in the center. What does that mean? I asked, dreading the answer. It means Aurora didn't die on cursed land, he said grimly. She was buried on it. Rowena inhaled sharply. Then the ritual site was never purified. No, Hawk confirmed. It was built over, and the energy below it unresolved. Violent has been seeping upward for years. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. So what do we do? Hick pulled a small red leather book from his satchel. He opened to a page written in 3 languages. Cherokee, Latin, and English. This, he said, pointing to the title, is the ritual of severance. Unlike the last one, this isn't a conversation. It's a final cut. He handed me a slip of paper with ingredients. Cedar ash, salt from grave clay, a lock of hair, the loved one's object, blood willingly given, and something that belongs to the other side. I stared at the list. What does that mean? Something from the other side, Rowena answered. Something the entity has touched, something it has made its own. I remembered the shoe, the blood-soaked yellow sneaker that had no reason to be inside her closet. I ran upstairs to my room, tore open the dresser drawer. There it was, wrapped in the towel, cold and stiff. But now, something had changed. The blood had spread. It covered the entire soul, and there was something written on the heel in what looked like fingernail scratches. Stay. I brought it back down. Hawk took it with a grim nod. This will do. He looked up at me. But you must perform the ritual yourself. You're the tether. You're the one it wants. And if I fail, Wolf exhaled, then it won't just take Aurora. It'll use you to get out. Midnight. We gathered in the backyard beneath the wide sky, under the bare branches of the oak tree that Aurora used to swing from. Hawk arranged the ritual site in a perfect circle. Salt ring. Red sand triangle. 4 candles at the cardinal points. In the center, her shoe, her hair, the toy camera, and the small stone Hawk handed me earlier now warm in my palm. This is the bridge, he said. Hold it when you speak her name. Rowena lit the candles one by one, her voice steady in chant. Wolf circled us, pouring a line of grave clay at the edge of the salt. Then Hawk handed me a small obsidian knife. You must give blood. I hesitated, but I remembered her voice. Daddy, I'm hurting. I gritted my teeth and dragged the blade across my palm. The blood hit the dirt like a whisper. The wind stilled. The flames flickered, then bent inward. I closed my eyes and whispered, Aurora Mary Hartwell, beloved daughter, I call you from the in-between. I opened the door not to darkness, but to bring you home. The wind howled, the candles flared, and the ground shook from the soil beneath the shoe. A long, thin crack spread outward, and then her voice. Daddy, I looked up. She stood just beyond the salt ring, her face pale, eyes wide. But behind her, the shadow, the same one, twisting upward, taller now, closer, its mouth unhinging wider than ever. It reached for her. Aurora turned to me, tears streaming. Please, don't let it take me. The wind screamed. Father Hawk yelled something, but I couldn't hear. The only thing I could see was her. I stepped into the circle, and the shadow lunged. I stepped into the circle. The shadow met me halfway, and it was like walking into a wall of ice, except the cold wasn't on my skin. It was inside me. It moved through my bones, my thoughts, the places where grief lived and loved ones rested. My knees buckled, my mouth filled with the taste of rust. Then I heard it again. You left her. You buried her. You moved on. The voice wasn't mine, but it was inside my skull, wrapping around my own thoughts like barbed wire. You always loved your work more. You were relieved when she died. Weren't you? No, I shouted. I never, but my body shook, because grief doesn't need truth. It feeds on guilt, and I had plenty of that to go around. The shadow surged forward, towering now. Its arms were long, dragging behind it like sheets of black smoke. It bent toward me, and where its face should have been, there was only her voice. Daddy, why didn't you hear me calling sooner? Behind it, Aurora wept, frozen in place. Her small hands clutched to her chest. I could see the closet in her bedroom behind her, but it was warped, stretched into something twisted and endless. Its doors throbbed like lungs, expanding and collapsing in rhythmic pulses. The entity turned. It wasn't speaking anymore. It was preparing to swallow her, and I had seconds to act. Focus on the tether. Hawk's voice cut through the chaos from somewhere behind me. Hold the stone and call her. I pulled the warm stone from my pocket. It glowed now, a pulsing red-orange, like the last coal in a dying fire. I gripped it tight, dropped to my knees, and shouted, Aurora Mary Hartwell, I am your father. You are not alone. Find me. The entity hissed no, screeched like metal tearing across glass. It turned toward me with its arms wide. Then Aurora moved. She stepped out from behind it, her face scrunched in pain, one step at a time. Each footfall sent ripples across the ritual circle. Daddy, she whimpered. I'm here, I said, voice shaking. I've always been here. The shadow shrieked again and lunged straight for her. I didn't think. I didn't pray. I threw the warmth stone into the air and stepped in between. It hit me like lightning. Not heat, not cold. Memory. I saw every moment I had failed her. The birthday I missed because of work. The night she had a nightmare and I told her to go back to bed. The time she asked why mommy didn't love me anymore and I told her not to ask. All of it. It crushed me. It wanted to. 'Cause if I broke, she would too. But then I felt her. A tiny hand slid into mine. Warm, familiar. I opened my eyes. She was standing beside me, and so was her light, a golden glow, soft as morning sun, pulsed from her chest outward like a star being born in real time. The shadow reared back, arms shriveling like leaves in firelight. Its scream turned hollow, panicked. It began to lose form, its edges coming apart in threads like unraveling cloth. The light spread from her into me, into the circle, into the world. The red sand ignited like a ring of fire, and then nothing, just silence. When I woke up, I was lying on my back in the yard. The candles had burned to waxy puddles. The salt was blown away, but Aurora's shoe was gone. So was the toy camera. And the closet light in her room, the one I never left on, was off. Rowena stood above me, tears in her eyes. She crossed, she whispered. You gave her enough light to find her way. Father Hawk placed a hand on my shoulder, firm but gentle. She's free. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. But it wasn't grief anymore. It was release. But as they helped me to my feet, as I looked back toward the house, I saw it. In the upstairs window, Aurora's room. Just a glimpse, a shape, tall, thin, watching, gone. The following morning was the first in over a week where I didn't hear her voice, not even in dreams. I woke on the living room couch, fully clothed, a scratchy blanket over me, probably Rowena's doing. Sunlight streamed through the blinds. The world outside looked absurdly normal. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over, that Aurora had passed on, that whatever came through the closet had been pushed back or destroyed. But the shape in the window wouldn't leave my mind. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't trauma. I saw it, and that meant something was still watching. I spent most of the day cleaning, not out of ritual, but necessity. The house felt like it had absorbed too much grief, too much fear. I scrubbed the floors, changed the bed sheets, threw out the expired milk and the untouched banana that had turned black on the kitchen counter. I washed her cereal bowl and placed it on the drying rack, let it stay there, didn't put it away. When I walked past Aurora's room, I hesitated. The door was cracked open again, not wide but just enough to make my stomach tighten. I pushed it slowly. Nothing inside moved. The closet door was shut. The lamp was unplugged. Her drawing still hung on the wall, faded, curling at the corners. I sat down on the edge of her bed and just sat. The air didn't feel heavy anymore, just quiet. But I wasn't alone. I felt it. At dusk, Inspector Wolf came back. No suit today, just jeans and a flannel. He looked tired in a different way, now relieved. Maybe, or unsettled. He handed me a flash drive without much preamble. Security footage, he said, from Oakwood Cemetery last week. Before the funeral, I raised an eyebrow. Why are you showing me this now? He didn't answer, just nodded toward my laptop. I plugged it in. The footage was grainy night vision quality. The camera angle showed the eastern section of the cemetery. Time code read 2:47 a.m. 2 days before Aurora's burial. At first, there was nothing. Then a movement, a figure, small, a little girl in a yellow dress, walking barefoot between the headstones. I froze. That's her. Wolf remained quiet. The girl walked toward the center of the screen, toward a very specific plot. Not hers. Not yet. She stopped at a crooked gravestone, bent down, whispered something. Then, behind her, that thing, tall, shadowed, emerging from behind a tree. It hovered, not walking but sliding, as if it didn't belong to the same dimension. And then, the feed cut to static. I slammed the laptop shut. What the hell was that? I asked. Wolf exhaled. We don't know. But that wasn't the first child we caught on camera out there, and it won't be the last. So what now? I asked. Is it still here? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the staircase. I think you weakened it, he said. Maybe even severed it, but you didn't destroy it. And you're not the only one it's ever reached for. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. If you ever hear a knock on the closet door again, don't answer. Not unless you're ready. That night, I returned to Aurora's room, sat on her bed, held one of her stuffed animals, read an old storybook aloud to no one. Just the way I used to. Just the way she liked. When I was done, I stood, kissed my fingers, and pressed them to the closet door. Good night, Cassia, I whispered. Wherever you are. No voice replied. No knock. Just silence. I walked out, turned off the light. But just before the door closed behind me, I looked back one last time, and for a second, only a second, the closet door breathed. I didn't tell anyone about the breathing. What would I even say? Hey, I think my dead daughter's closet exhaled last night. That's the kind of sentence that gets you locked up, or worse, ignored. But I knew what I saw. That slow movement, the gentle inward pull, like lungs collapsing, followed by the faintest outward push, as if something unseen was exhaling behind the wood. It wasn't violent, it wasn't loud, but it was alive, and that terrified me more than screams ever could. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the hallway outside her door with a mug of black coffee and a notepad in my lap. I told myself I was writing thoughts down, processing, trying to make sense of things. But really, I was listening to the air, to the creaks, to the silence. Every so often, I'd swear I heard the gentle shift of something brushing inside the closet. A scrape, a breath, then nothing. The stillness became so thick, I started to forget what silence sounded like before all this began. Around 3:23 a.m., my phone buzzed. Blocked number. My blood ran cold. I answered on the first ring. Silence, then static. Then, Daddy. The voice was small, distant, familiar, but it wasn't Aurora. It was off the tone hollow. The syllables slightly delayed, like a puppet mouthing words it didn't understand. I gripped the phone tight. Who is this? Static again. Then, she's warm now. She doesn't miss you anymore. I hung up. Immediately, the hallway light flickered once, then went dark. The house groaned beneath me, an old man waking from a terrible dream. The next morning, I returned to Father Hawk. He didn't look surprised when I told him. She's not calling anymore, I said. But something else is. He nodded solemnly. The ritual severed her tether, he said. But the doorway itself, it's still weak, still cracked. That kind of damage doesn't just vanish. It lingers like scar tissue. So what now? We need to seal it permanently. He pulled out a small cloth pouch and handed it to me. Inside, a vial of dark oil, a silver needle, and a circular symbol etched into a wafer of bone. Tonight, he said, you place the seal on the inside wall of the closet. Mark the wood, speak her name, then recite the final passage. I didn't ask what would happen if I failed. I already knew. That evening, I went into her room alone. I kept the lights off, Only the fading gold of twilight came through the curtains. I lit a candle and placed it at the foot of the closet. The air was cold, not in a dramatic way, just wrong. Like the house had an extra breath in its lungs that didn't belong to me. I opened the door. The interior was still. No shadows, no pulsing void, just wooden drywall. But I knew better. I stepped inside. The scent of lavender sachets still lingered weak, but present. I reached out and touched the back panel. It throbbed, almost imperceptibly but real, the same way a heartbeat feels through a vein when you hold your wrist against it. I uncapped the vial, dipped the needle, and began to carve, slowly, carefully, just as Hawk instructed. The symbol took shape, a spiral split by a vertical line, surrounded by 4 glyphs. The closet groaned. The temperature dropped again. I whispered her name, Aurora Mary Hartwell. Then I recited the line in Cherokee. My mouth stumbled. The syllables didn't feel right in my tongue. But as the last word passed my lips, the air in the closet shifted. It wasn't violent, not like before. It was quiet, final, heavy, like a door had closed far, far away. The light of the candle dimmed, then steadied. I stepped back, and for the first time since her death, I didn't feel watched. I closed the closet door. It clicked and stayed closed. That night, I dreamed of her. Not trapped, not crying, just smiling. She stood beneath the oak tree in the backyard, wearing her yellow dress, hair in twin braids. She held a toy camera in her hands and raised it toward me. Click! Then she waved and faded with the morning light. I woke up with the feeling of sunlight on my face and the weight of something invisible lifting off my chest. Not grief doesn't leave, but the pressure, the pull, the sense that something was always watching. That portrait was gone. For the first time in weeks, I stood in Aurora's room and didn't feel like I was trespassing. I opened the window. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of pine and dust. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Somewhere farther, a kid laughed. I sat on her bed and let it sink in. She was gone. But this time, it felt right, complete. That afternoon, I returned to Oakwood. I needed to see it for myself, to make sure she was really resting. The cemetery was quiet. A few birds, the rustle of dry leaves, sunlight scattered across the headstones like tiny coins. I walked the path to her grave slow, deliberate steps, half expecting the wind to shift or the ground to hum. But there was only peace. Her headstone stood small and graceful among the older, more eroded markers. Aurora Mary Hartwell, 2016-2024. Beloved daughter, forever in our hearts. I knelt beside it, placed a small bundle of wildflowers near the base. My hand brushed the stone, and I felt the cool granite pulse with quiet stillness. No pull, no pressure, no whisper behind the veil. I sat with her for a while. I don't remember how long. Time felt strange here, heavy and slow, like honey. But eventually, I stood, and that's when I noticed it. A grave 2 plots over, slightly older. The name on the stone, Elijah Marchant Griggs, 2011-20. The soil around the base had shifted. Fresh, despite the date. I squinted. There, pressed into the dirt, small footprints. Bowed, facing the wrong direction, facing toward Aurora's grave. I reported it to Inspector Wolf. He came out that same evening. We stood together in the failing light, staring at those prints. He crouched beside them, touched the edge of one with his gloved finger. Too small for an adult, he said. Too deliberate for an animal. He looked up at me, jaw tight. It's not over. Is it? I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then, you closed your door, Daniel. But there are others, more cracks, more closets. He stood and looked around at the trees bordering the cemetery. They always come back where the veil is thin. I thought about Aurora's diary. If you leave the door open, the dark gets curious. What do we do? I asked. We wait, Wolf said. We listen, and when it comes again, we make sure we're ready. That night, I returned home and found a package on my doorstep. No return address, just a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, slightly curled at the edges. It showed Aurora, but not from my collection. She was standing in our hallway, holding her toy camera, smiling directly at the lens. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, a tall figure, shadow-like, blurry, standing just behind her. I flipped the photo over. 3 words were written in pencil. It followed her. I didn't sleep after I saw the photo. I sat at the kitchen table with the picture in front of me, turning it over again and again like I'd somehow missed something. Like there would be an explanation if I just stared long enough. But there wasn't. It had followed her. Or maybe it had always been here. Maybe I hadn't saved her. Maybe I just bought her time. The next morning, I took the photo to Father Hawk. He studied it without speaking, eyes narrowed, fingers tracing the edges like they could feel the residue of what lingered on the other side. "It's not done," he finally said. I swallowed hard, but I closed the door. He shook his head. "You closed your daughter's door, but that thing, it wasn't only interested in her. It latched onto her because you loved her, because you saw her. But now that she's gone," he met my eyes. "It might be looking for someone else." I felt sick. So what do I do? Wait for it to come back? Hide? No, he said. You watch her, you listen, and you remember. 'Cause if it comes back, it won't knock twice. I spent the next few days reinforcing Aurora's room. Not with locks or boards, but with memory. I filled it with the scent she loved, lavender oil in the corners, tucked under her pillows. I placed her books back on the shelf. I found her old drawings and taped them up like protective wards. Not because I believed they'd stop anything, but because she believed they would. Rowena came by with cedar bundles. She burned one in each room, whispering low chants as smoke curled into every corner, every vent. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "You'll always feel it now." But that's not the same as it being here. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed her. 3 nights later, I heard a knock. Just one, soft, delicate. I sat up in bed, pulse hammering in my throat. Another knock, this time louder, not violent, just insistent. I stood, walked down the hallway, past the bathroom, past Aurora's room. The knock came again, but not from her closet, not even from upstairs, from underneath, the basement. I hadn't stepped down there since the first week after she died. I'd forgotten what it even looked like. The door creaked open with a groan, like something remembering its own name. The stairs were steep. The smell hit me first, damp concrete, old wood, and something else. Ash at the bottom of the stairs. I saw it. A new door, wooden, old, and definitely not mine. It was embedded into the foundation like it had grown there. No handle, just carvings, and a message scratched into the center panel in handwriting too precise to be random. "It still wants in." I turned and left, closed the basement door behind me, locked it, bolted it, then sealed it with cedar wax and salt. But I didn't throw away the photo. I didn't burn the dress. I didn't move. Because I knew now, this wasn't about one door. It was about all of them. The ones we ignore, the ones we forget, the ones we build and never close properly. It's been 3 weeks since the last knock. Sometimes I hear things in the walls. Sometimes I don't. But every night before bed, I press my hand to her closet and whisper, "Good night, Cassia. Daddy's still here." And sometimes, in the space between dreams and waking, I hear her whisper back. But sometimes, I don't think it's her.